Joining me to discuss, I got Michael Harriot back to talk about this foolishness with these senators and, essentially why, Michael, you think that making white people feel bad is actually a sound political strategy. Michael Harriot, senior writer for The Root, thank you for being back with us. Now, listen, you wrote, before I get to the current piece, I want to remind everybody that you wrote a piece that was bluntly titled F. Kyrsten Sinema. And I remember when I saw this, I was like, oh, somebody's going to make him change that title. And then I don't think it was changed. So can you please explain to us, to the viewers, what she has done to warrant such a headline and such disdain?
Well, first of all, right, she is let's forget about her obstruction of changing the filibuster. You remember when she obstructed raising the minimum wage. She ran on a progressive platform, right? And then she even virtual signaled that more by, saying if she got elected, she'd be the first bisexual woman, white woman out of Arizona who was ever elected. It was like some long, complicated title that, was virtue signaling like she was really progressive. But all she ended up being was a white woman who does what white women do, right? She just stops progress and makes it all about her. Remember that she voted to uphold the current minimum wage and not raise it to $15 in the first bill of Biden's tenure. And she keeps doing stuff like that. She recently, her most recent thing was to vote against taxing the rich. Now, all of this is stuff that she said she was going to do. And then the worst part about it is when she's asked to explain it, she never has an explanation. She just, when she obstructed the minimum wage, she says, well, you know me, I want all Americans to have a good job and to have a fair wage, but this is not the way to do it. But then tell us the way to do it, right?
What is the way to do it, right?
Right. She doesn't say, neither her or Joe Manchin says, this is the kind of infrastructure bill I want. All they'll say is, nah, not like that. Right. And then you got to guess what they want, which is, I really just think they're ops. They're people who will sit here to make the Democratic agenda combustible and obstruct it. And I don't think they really have their own agenda.
And let me just break something down for you, because I appreciate you saying that she ran on this whole wanted to use some others and some letters of the LGBTQ community to have kinship, right? She's always been the first bisexual, this, that, and the other thing. And as a woman who happens to be a leader in the LGBTQ movement, just like we say that all skin folk ain't kinfolk, that absolutely applies to her with regards to the LGBTQ movement. I mean, Kyrsten is not a progressive. And I don't think would ever want to be associated with being a progressive, because she likes the fact that Republicans elect her in the state of Arizona and boost her career. And so do the corporations. That's her jam. The thing that you just hit on that makes me agree with your headline, though, is the real disdain for accountability to what she's doing. And you notice she does not do interviews. She will not be on the record explaining herself or her philosophy around governing. I don't know what she goes home to Arizona and tells the people that she's working on behalf of them to do what exactly, because she has never really explained what is my governing philosophy, who do I represent, who do I stand for, what do I care about in terms of economic development, how do I want to see people's pocketbook, be whatever, swell up or not, or contract. Do I care about people of color? Do I not? She doesn't talk about civil rights. I don't know what her jam is. So the problem with her, I think, is that I find her lack of public discourse to just be shady as hell. What are you hiding, right? Because if you really do have convictions, and to be fair, Joe Manchin comes from West Virginia, and it's the coal state. So he's going to be out in front like the loudest person against all of the climate solutions in the infrastructure bill, because he's hugging coal. So we know where he's coming from and why, right, to some degree. Anyway, all of this at the end of the day makes me think of something that you've also said over and over again, is that whiteness is going to protect whiteness, right? White people are going to white, and whiteness will protect whiteness. And the irony of both Manchin and Sinema's actions is that they are blocking proposals that would actually help the white people in their state. So how do they even reconcile any of that?
Well,
They're leaving the people in the lurch.
Yeah, well, first of all, we have to recognize, like, Joe Manchin realized West Virginia is like a ghetto state. Like, they have a high rate of teenage pregnancy and drug abuse. It's not like Joe Manchin is protecting a separate constituency than the people these bills would help, right? Like, he needs those social programs. And people of Arizona do too. But I think what they are playing, the card they're playing, is that white people have been taught to believe that if black people get something, then they're taking it from white people. It's called a zero-sum theory, right? Like, if there's only a finite amount of resources, only a finite amount of rights, and if black people get some, then they got to be taken from white people, and if some black people believe that, like, if trans women get rights, then you must be taking some rights away from black people. And that's not the way the world works. That's not the way rights work. But that's the game that Sinema and Joe Manchin are playing, right? Like, Joe Manchin will vote for a border wall and think it's fiscally responsible, but he is arguing about human infrastructure. He is arguing about education and care for the elderly, jobs and programs that will help people in his state. But because they will help poor white people, they will also help black people, right? And because of the disparities in income that America has created. And a lot of white people, especially conservative white people, would rather have nothing than to see black people get some too.
Which is, it's just so mind-boggling to me. I remember when Donald Trump first got elected, there were all these white people in West Virginia. Washington Post, you guys can look it up. Washington Post actually did this expose on all these voters in West Virginia who were like, yeah, we're with Donald Trump and he's going to do something and make our lives better. Now, at this time, that was when we were really reporting and talking so much about the meth crisis. We're talking so much about opioids crisis and how people in West Virginia were really being affected by the drugs, which, if you really get under it, all the pharmaceutical companies are complicit in the availability and access to a lot of those drugs that the people were overdosing on. The very people who are funding Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, but I digress. And all these folks are like, yeah, Donald Trump is going to do this thing for us. Washington Post goes back like 6 months after he's elected, and they're like, so what do you think of the job that President Trump is doing? And Michael, everything you're saying is true. These poor white people, and not just poor white people, I mean, these impoverished white people who are struggling deeply with health disparities themselves. Obviously, they're unemployed, all the challenges they're facing in their state. They said, well, we didn't really expect that Donald Trump was going to like get us jobs or like solve our health care problems or anything, but we just know that he believes in us. And it was so mind-boggling that they admittedly would vote against their day-to-day interests, right? Because there's something that they're not saying. And the thing they're not saying is that we really just don't want this new American majority of people of color to come in and be bigger and badder than us. And so I wonder, what your thoughts are about the Democrat strategy overall in this constant playing to these poor white people, right? Joe Biden is always in Pennsylvania or somewhere. Not necessarily in urban areas, not necessarily in rural black communities. And then the last few months, there have been a lot of fails, right, with regards to and misses with regards to the Democratic Party and its policy stuff. What do you think is going to happen with the party as they realize that, they're kind of damaging their ability to control Congress? Or do they even know that? Why do they still think the white people are the crux of all of this?
I think the problem with the progressive wing of the Democratic Party is that they continually bow to the moderate wing, right? Like when you look at the Republicans, the far right wing, right? Like, you can't be a Republican and be, pro-choice, because we know that the far right part of their party controls the whole party. Now, the the left wing, the progressive side of the Democratic Party isn't that, demanding. So they let that moderate wing, they do whatever they want, right? They let them sidetrack a progressive agenda continually in search of these poor white people and these moderate white people that never pan out, right? And we always blame the moderates, but what we're going to have to do is start blaming the progressive. And that's why I'm glad to see them stand firm on this infrastructure bill and say, look, we ain't gonna pass none of them unless we pass both of them, right? Like, because that's the kind of demands that the progressive side is going to have to make to to get progress, because those moderate side is really always going to chase those white voters to no avail.
Indeed. Michael, I am so appreciate your candor and the way that you sum it all up as you've written, F. Kyrsten Sinema. And you also talked about why guilting white people is like the move. So everybody go check out that piece at The Root. Michael Harriot, senior writer there at The Root. It's always a pleasure, and look forward to having you back on Amplified soon.